Hello, you're watching WION World is One with my colleague Rajni and me, Isha Hanspal, and this is Speed News. Let's dive straight into the show and get you all the stories making news in the next half hour or so. Israeli army has released footage showing ground and air operations against Hamas targets in Gaza. In its video footage, Israeli soldiers are seen carrying weapons and firing towards Hamas targets. According to the Israeli army, they encountered Hamas fighters in a building during the operation. 2 Israeli sergeants were killed and 2 army officers were injured. Intense Israeli airstrikes in the south of the Gaza Strip on Monday killed and injured dozens of Palestinians. The strikes also hit areas where Israel had told people to seek shelter. Israeli troops and tanks have also been pressed into the ground campaign against Hamas militants in the south of the enclave. Israel held an event on sexual violence against women during the October 7th Hamas attack at the United Nations in New York. Israel has been critical of the world body's response to the attacks. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the Security Council last week that sexual violence committed on October 7th must be vigorously probed into and prosecuted. Hamas has rejected the accusations of rape and sexual violence by Palestinian militants. The Islamist group dismissed claims by women and advocacy groups as part of what it dubbed as a series of Israeli lies. Explosions lit up the sky as intense Israeli airstrikes hit the Gaza Strip. Early on Monday, Israel ordered Palestinians to leave parts of Gaza's main southern city, Khan Yunis. But residents said the areas they had been told to go are also coming under fire. The explosions took place close to residential areas in Gaza, many of which had blackouts due to lack of electricity. Desperate Gazans in Khan Yunis headed towards Rafah. Many took shelter inside a hospital compound. Human rights lawyers moved court in the Netherlands to call for a halt to the export of fighter jet parts to Israel that could be used in attacks on Gaza. The organizations allege that delivery of parts for F-35 jets makes the Netherlands complicit in possible war crimes. Lawyers for the Dutch state said they have considered the risks of allowing exports to proceed. The lawyers also emphasized that it was also in the Netherlands' border security and political interests to follow through on obligations and continue the shipments. A ruling is expected in the civil case in The Hague within 2 weeks and can be appealed. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said the September 2022 Nord Stream pipeline blast disrupted cooperation between Moscow and Berlin. Putin's remarks came while accepting the credentials of over 20 new foreign ambassadors, including Germany and Britain, to Russia. Russia has blamed the United States, Britain and Ukraine for the pipeline blasts. However, all the countries have denied their involvement. Putin said at the event that he hopes relations between Russia and the UK will improve. Russia's relations with Western countries are at the lowest level since the Cold War, after the Ukraine invasion in February of 2022. Scores of trucks are blocking the Polish-Ukrainian border crossing since November 6th. Polish drivers are demanding reinstatement of a permit system for Ukrainian companies to operate in the EU and for European truckers to enter Ukraine. The permits were abolished after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Polish truckers complain that this has led to unfair competition by Ukrainian counterparts. Polish drivers have found support from Polish farmers and Slovakian truckers. They argue that Ukrainian truckers offer services at lower prices and transport goods within the EU. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva held the first government consultations in 8 years. Speaking at an Industry and Commerce Chamber event, Lula underlined the importance of a German-Brazilian declaration of intent on a partnership for socially responsible and ecological transformation. Scholz mentioned the EU-Mercosur free trade deal, saying he hoped for a swift agreement soon. Lula has extensively traveled across country since returning to office in January, trying to restore Brazil's standing on the global stage. Britain is trying to cut down the number of migrants arriving in Britain through legal routes by raising the minimum salary they must earn in a job. Interior Minister James Cleverly said that the government will raise the minimum salary threshold for foreign skilled workers to £38,700. Currently, it is £26,200. The government will reform the list of jobs where exceptions are made due to shortages and toughen rules on whether workers can bring their families. The measures could lead to new disputes with business owners who have struggled to hire workers in recent years. The US State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller has said Washington is working with the intelligence community to assess espionage charges against a former ambassador. Victor Manuel Rocha, who served as US ambassador to Bolivia, was charged with multiple federal crimes, including acting as an illegal foreign agent. Rocha was arrested and is expected to appear before a federal judge in Miami today. In a court document filed in the Southern District of Florida, the US has accused Rocha of secretly supporting Cuba and its clandestine intelligence gathering mission against Washington since 1981. The United States has expanded its visa restriction policy for Ugandan officials over accusations of undermining democracy and oppressing marginalized groups. Washington also tightened its visa policy for officials in Zimbabwe. US had first imposed visa restrictions on Ugandan officials earlier in June this year, after the African nation passed an anti-LGBTQ law. The law, considered one of the harshest in the world, was enacted in May and carries the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken separately announced new restrictions for Zimbabwe officials. Now, this comes after international observers said the country's presidential elections did not meet domestic standards. A US delegation is in India to discuss the alleged plot to murder Khalistani terrorist in the United States, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. While House Deputy National Security Advisor Jonathan Feiner acknowledged the setting up of an investigative panel by India to probe the unsuccessful plot to kill the Khalistani terrorist on US soil. In recent weeks, United States' National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken have reportedly discussed this issue with their Indian counterparts. Kenyan President William Ruto is in New Delhi on a 3-day state visit. His visit is the first by a Kenyan president in 6 years. Earlier in the day, President Ruto was welcomed at the Rashtrapati Bhavan by Prime Minister Modi and President Murmu. The Kenyan leader is also inspected the Guard of Honor. Following his ceremonial welcome, President William Ruto proceeded to the Rajghat Memorial Complex, where he took part in a wreath-laying ceremony honoring deceased Indian leaders. Ruto has underscored the need to consolidate the bilateral relationship between both nations with emphasis on agriculture, pharmaceuticals and IT sectors. Also on the agenda are partnership opportunities over vaccine production and genomics technology. Khalistani terrorist leader Lakhbir Singh has died. The 72-year-old self-styled chief of the banned outfits, the Khalistani Liberation Force and the International Sikh Youth Foundation, had been running his operations from Pakistan for several years. The Indian government has designated Lakhbir Singh as a terrorist against the Unlawful Activities and Prevention Act. Lakhbir Singh's son, Bhaggu Barar, is currently living in Canada and is accused of carrying out terrorist activities in Punjab. India's National Investigation Agency is conducting raids at 8 locations in Jammu and Kashmir in connection with the terror funding case. According to sources, the raids are underway in close coordination with Jammu and Kashmir Police and Central Armed Police Forces at 7 locations in Kashmir and 1 in Jammu. The raids at Shopian and Baramulla come days after the agency arrested one person allegedly involved in the delivery of weapons through drones to militants active in Kashmir. Seven people, including 4 children, were injured in an explosion in the northwestern Pakistani city of Peshawar. Now, police say the incident took place near a public school at around 9 a.m. local time. Police and rescue teams were sent to the site as soon as the blast was reported, and the injured children were moved to a private hospital. So far, no one has claimed responsibility for the attack. A bus lost control and crashed into a tree in Thailand, killing 14 passengers and injuring 20 others. The accident occurred in the western province of Prachuap Khiri Khan at midnight. The bus's front was split in half after the crash, as footage showed rescuers pulling passengers out from the wreckage. On the other hand, an American woman died after a shark attacked her while paddle boarding in the Bahamas. The woman was found dead by emergency services at the scene in Milwaukee Bay. According to authorities, one of her legs had been severed. The municipal government has warned people to stay away from local beaches. While fatal shark attacks are not common in the Bahamas, at least 2 others have been reported recently. Three survivors were found in Indonesia after the Merapi volcano erupted in West Sumatra. Rescue operations were temporarily halted due to safety concerns. The rescue team has recovered 11 dead bodies out of 75 climbers who were in the area at the time of Sunday's eruption. There were 49 climbers evacuated from the area earlier on Monday, and many were being treated for burns. Authorities raised the alert to the second highest level and prohibited residents from going within 3 kilometers of the crater. Now, Merapi is one of the most active volcanoes on the Sumatra island, and its most deadly eruption was in April of 1979.
Makanya saya minta 12 itu
Cyclone Mong is wreaking havoc in India. After making its way away from the Chennai coast, it is right now headed off the Andhra Pradesh's coast. According to India's weather office, it is moving north. The cyclone is expected to hit the coast of Andhra Pradesh near the town of Bipatla. Meanwhile, Tamil Nadu has been experiencing incessant rainfall since the formation of the low depression in the Bay of Bengal. Life in Chennai came to a standstill as water flooded all major roads of the city. Chennai witnessed its worst rain in 70 to 80 years. The death toll from floods in northern Tanzania following torrential rains this weekend has risen to 63, while 116 people have been left injured. Over 5,000 people have been affected due to the floods. Many are feared to be trapped under debris after torrential downpour during the weekend washed away vehicles and brought down buildings in the hillside town of Katesh. Government has said that around 400 workers have been deployed for rescue operations in the Hanang region. Around 100 houses have been swallowed by landslides in Tanzania's Katesh and Hanang district. A total of over 1,000 houses have been affected by this calamity. Rescuers are operating in extreme conditions, including power and communication blackouts. Customers at a Japanese restaurant are opting to have their meal with a side dish of tough love by paying their waiting staff to slap them in the face. Diners are reportedly flocking to an eatery in Nagoya on the south coast of Japan, where waitresses are charging around $2 to serve this bizarre experience. The unusual practice has gained such popularity that managers had to hire more female staff to meet their pre-meal violence. A kangaroo that escaped its handlers during transport to a new home was captured on Monday after a week in the wild, but the kangaroo did not give in without a fight as it planted a punch in the face of one of the police officers who brought her run to an end. Officers on patrol spotted the kangaroo at around 3 a.m. on Monday on a rural property in northern Oshawa. They contacted the kangaroo's handlers and grabbed it by the tail. The kangaroo punched one of the officers in the face during the capture. In some business news, the US dollar regained some ground this morning as it hovered near a one-week high against a basket of currencies, while the Australian dollar fell after its central bank left interest rates unchanged. The greenback held broadly steady and pushed away from Monday's three-month low against the yen that was helped by a slowdown in core consumer inflation in Tokyo that put downward pressure on the Japanese currency. The euro, meanwhile, languished near a three-week low hit on Monday. A private sector survey by Kayaksen showed that China's services activity expanded at a quicker pace in November. The survey showed expansion as the upturn in new businesses were the best seen for 3 months amid reports of a firmer market conditions. The findings present a mixed picture of the vast services sector, as an official survey last week showed the sector unexpectedly contracted for the first time since December last year, prompting calls for more stimulus measures. More regulatory troubles for Meta, a group representing 83 Spanish media outlets has filed $600 million lawsuit against Facebook owners, Meta platforms, citing unfair competition in the advertising market in a case that could be replicated across the European Union. The AMI Media Association said the lawsuit was filed collectively by the newspapers with the commercial court and alleged that Meta violated EU data protection rules between 2018 and 2023.